Well, welcome back. We're now the 29th of April, so this is the thought for the day for now, and we are still in the journey into Franciscan prayer, or the attitude of the Franciscan spirituality to prayer, and the various aspects, and some unique takes, although obviously Francis isn't unique. Don't mind the dog. Francis isn't unique in some of these things. However, he had a particular charism that showed that when he engaged in something, he gave his whole self to it, and prayer is no different. And today we're going to look at two little aspects of Franciscan prayer. That's praying with the liturgy and praying at all times. Now, for the Franciscans, attendance at the Eucharist or Mass, it would have been back in Francis's day, or Holy Communion, was expected and still is expected. As I mentioned in my little spiel on the Third Order, one of the things we sign up to is attending the Eucharist on a regular basis. And it's no different, and it has been that way ever since. And unlike other monastic orders, the Franciscans weren't tied to a pattern of daily offices. So, for instance, the Benedictines and Augustinians and things and such, and the Dominicans who follow the rule of Saint Benedict, basically their main worship, their main way of engaging with the world and doing the work of God in their charism is by attendance at the daily offices. And in the Benedictine tradition, which is the predominant tradition within most monasteries, that's a seven times a day daily offices, and they were the compulsory part of the day. Whereas the Franciscans don't have a cloister. They're not cloistered in a monastery. The world is their cloister. And therefore it was just as likely for the Franciscan to be saying his midday office whilst grooming and attending to his Franciscan donkey in the middle of the rain, or whilst out on a evangelistic mission or something of that ilk. The Franciscan takes the liturgy seriously, and punctuates their day with the daily offices. However, those daily offices aren't confined to Gregorian chant or anything like that. The music that the Franciscan sings is the music of creation itself, out in creation. You're more likely during your Franciscan midday prayer, as it were, to hear and be accompanied not by the singing of monks, but by the sound of birds in the trees. Now, I don't know about you, but I know which one I prefer. As much as I love things like Gregorian chant, then there is nothing like being accompanied by the beautiful song of nature itself. So that's one of the key differences, really, between a Franciscan approach to liturgical worship, as opposed to really our cousins and brothers and sisters in faith that are within cloistered monastic communities such as the Benedictines. That is, our daily offices are always there, and we always attend our daily offices, but we may attend them amidst the hustle and bustle of real world activity. It's very much an incarnational perspective of what the liturgy is to be. Now that's a quick summary of our approach to liturgical prayer and worship. And now the other thing that that characterizes the Franciscans, and again it draws on the scriptures as all things Franciscan do, and that's the idea of praying at all times. St. Paul says this, pray at all times. Well, what does that mean? Well, for a Franciscan, that means to live in an attitude of prayer on all the time. So, as I'm going to refer back to some quotes. A quote from Solano, which was one of the biographers of St. Francis, as quoted in Brother Ramon's book. Solano says that when secular persons or business would disturb Francis, he would interrupt his prayers rather than end them, and return to them again in his innermost being, effectively saying that when something else takes us away from our prayerful contemplation and time in God's presence, which that will from time to, which will throughout the day, we haven't ended our prayer with God, or our time with God. All we have done is suspend it for a little while until we resume it back at the point where we were when other business interrupted. And it's that sort of prayerful activity. Again, it was also being constantly seeking to be led by the Spirit. One of the things that characterized Francis was that he was constantly in communication with the Holy Spirit within him. So his spirit was in communication with the Spirit. Taking that, again, a passage from Paul's letter to the Ephesians, being in step with the Spirit, therefore being able to live and be fruitful with the fruits of the Spirit. So it wasn't necessarily that Francis spent all his day literally on his knees in prayer. No, even walking down the street, making a decision as to which way to go and which way not to go, was handed over to God. And he sought within his own spirit to be in connection with what the Holy Spirit wanted. There was a classic story of where he was out with one of his brothers, and they came to a crossroad with, it was a three ways they could go, either straight on or what, and it had different places and destinations depending on which road they took. And the brother asked him, Father Francis, which direction do we want to go? And he got the other brother to spin around until he was pretty dizzy, and when he said stop, and he asked, which way are you facing? I'm facing towards Siena. That is the destination that the Spirit wishes us to go in. And when he got there, Francis and his companion were able to act powerfully in that they were able to reconcile two disputing groups within the community, for which the bishop of the town of Siena was exceptionally grateful for. So it's these little stories, and the brother wrote, and this is again from Brother Raymond, was at that moment he understood with certainty that the spirit of divine wisdom and grace guided Francis in all of his actions. And that is the model that Francis gives us in praying at all times. That in all our actions, to be in tune and to be listening to what the Spirit is saying to our spirit, to be in step with the Spirit. So these are just two other little aspects of Franciscan prayer that I wanted to bring you today. That of liturgical prayer, that even in the daily business, whether you be washing the dishes or attending a board meeting, you can still be praying the offices and carve out time to pray the offices. You don't need to be in any special place. The world itself is the special place. And also praying at all times, to be in that constant attitude of prayerfulness, putting over our daily business, even the minuscule things, into God's care, and to listen to what the Spirit might be saying to our spirit.